fact, Ernie Cochran, a good friend of mine, asked me the question, why are you on this panel? These guys really know what they're talking about. And the reality is I don't. I know about 1/10 of what these guys have to offer, if that much. But I wanted to be able to give you an example of how reflecting what your perspective might be relative to this conversation, especially with some of the smaller DOTs or some of the district offices associated with those DOTs. As you can see by our title here, it's small staff, big results. And when we talk about small staff at the San Bernardino Associated Governments, you are currently looking at the entire public affairs office. Right? And so that was when I came on board 3 years ago. That was when what I came into was just an absence of any presence at all in that social media space. And I thought it was important that we participate, even though I had a lot of ignorance about what it was all about and where it could take me. I thought it was important that we at least become somewhat relevant, because I felt that what we were doing in the traditional ways of just pushing out emails to our media partners and hoping that they run something in their traffic section on page 18 wasn't having enough of a voice with our community, or even really truly appreciating who our audience was relative to the information that we were trying to share. And so I think some of that will come into play for you. What I looked at, though, because I was very intimidated by all the things that Ken just shared with you about how big this potential opportunity is as a single individual within the office, I didn't know really where I wanted to go. I knew that there were some platforms that were just going to be too daunting for me to take on that relationship that's necessary in order to really make it what it's supposed to be. Things like Facebook to me are a little more relational and back and forth, that I just didn't have that always-on capability that Lloyd referred to earlier. So I chose Twitter as my platform of choice, because it allowed me to kind of drift in and out of the conversation. I could stay in tune with what was being talked about without actually having to put content out there, but when I wanted to put content, I could. 3 years later, we're still relatively small in the Twitter world, which is exactly what I want. I'm not looking to necessarily change the entire world. I'm looking to change the world in which I live in a little bit more. We're at 1,000 followers now. Whoa, everybody go crazy. Almost that many people in the room, actually. But when I started, it was just a trickle, and mostly it was our private sector partners that thought following us would give them some kind of advantage into their bidding opportunities or their procurement chances. So as a result, Ken followed us, who follows everybody, actually. So that's not really counting, I think. So then at least I knew what my audience was at that time. You know, it removed participating in Twitter and having a group of followers, removed some of that ambiguity about who I was trying to talk to. Because when I put out things in a press release and then it gets in the paper, I don't really know who's reading it. I don't know who's touching back on it. I don't know what their response to that stuff is. So it was very important for me to kind of appreciate and understand that. We've since expanded to people that are more interested in our board activity, some of our traffic information, because we do deliver transportation projects. Our current program is about $1 billion in construction. We have about $4 billion in development. So we need to reach out to the public in different ways to make sure that they understand what their lives are about to entail relative to specific projects. Here are some of the things that we put out there. That's the first picture in the upper left is our board activity. I'll post something of significance, just so that it kind of attracts the attention of what's happened with our board. And then I'll link you over to our website where you can follow the board agenda and understand what's going on there. And for the private sector, that's important to understand how to track and chase the work that we provide. Down below is one of the community meetings that we still do. We still go to the gymnasium at 6:30 p.m. and meet with 13 people from our community as a reflection of the entire 2 million that represent our county. But we still do that. That's still an active part of what we do. But we're looking to look at other social opportunities or media opportunities to become more inclusive in that conversation. But it still shows that we're part of the community. And that's a big part of what I was trying to do, is let people know that we were indeed part of the community that they're in. We share traffic information, we retweet other transportation agencies' traffic information, because it's important that it's all the same customers, and we want to make sure that we're reaching to those same customers. But there's what I'm really here to talk about today is one specific example about a project that we had in San Bernardino that recently just completed. The Interstate 215 widening project is a project, a $640 million project over 7 years, 4 phases, very significant project through a significant corridor in our county. The Interstate 215 runs right through San Bernardino. It's one of 4 major freeway systems in our county, and roughly carries about 110,000 vehicles daily through the corridor. It's a kind of a secondary goods movement corridor. It also feeds a lot of our recreational communities as well. So it's an important freeway system within our system. What was going to happen though is that the construction team needed to shift traffic from the northbound roadbed over to our southbound roadbed in order to start to work on the other side of the freeway for this widening effort. So they told me that they're going to have a 55-hour closure and that we need to get the word out a little bit. They told me that it was going to be on Cinco de Mayo weekend, which was also an interesting consideration. And they told me 3 weeks before it was going to happen. And so we had almost no budget as well, and diversion was going to be a critical part of this piece of the puzzle. Excuse me. And so if you're familiar with 55-hour closures in Southern California, there's that whole Carmageddon concept that goes on, and we had our own version. We're called the Inland Empire, and so we were trying to avoid the Inland Empire Carmageddon, and I was very fearful. The LA Carmageddon had tons of time, tons of money, tons of resources that allowed them to market that closure, which ended up not being a Carmageddon at all. It actually went very smoothly and minimal effect on the public because they knew what was going on and they were able to make choices. I didn't think I was going to have that opportunity with only 3 weeks to go and a budget of a whopping $20,000 to try to take that on. And if I was to buy traditional space on the traditional media, I probably would have gotten onto one radio station during one portion of the drive time, but I was covering 55 hours and the 3 to 6 drivers weren't going to be there for the other 21 hours throughout the day. So that was a consideration that I needed to take into play. One of my fears, as we just talked about, is that this social media stuff is huge, potentially. And so I wasn't equipped to take on the relationship part of that one-on-one with whoever was going to come. And I also wasn't ready to have the whole herd of social media turn towards me. I know I would have looked like Simba there on the bottom of that Timba, we'll call him Timba for this case. So I was very fearful of that. And not only going into it, but also coming out of it. I wasn't looking to maintain that relationship because once you start, as Lloyd talked to and Ken talked about, then people are expecting that you're going to stay engaged and stay on with them. And I just am not resourced to do that, as many of you are probably not resourced in that capacity as well. So it was very fearful. So I wanted to look at other opportunities. And so what I had been doing, and I had spoken on some risk communication efforts in the past and the whole credibility transference type of stuff where you get some other person to say your message that's believable rather than yourself when you're not. So I thought, well, who can take on this message burden for us? And we worked with our local radio station, 99.1, that had a relatively significant following at the time within their social platforms. They were looking, though, at the time, thankfully, to become more of a traffic resource for Inland Empire radio listeners. And so they were wanting to be creative with us and not require a lot of input or resource from us to be able to do this. They just wanted to participate. And so we tapped into their numbers. Those were the numbers that I was most interested in, more than their listenership. They actually had a following on the social side because I thought that could create the kind of buzz that I need. That 22,000 actually resonates out to 10, 20-fold when you think about the followers of the followers that are involved in this process. And so I thought that was going to be good. They have the same demographic I'm looking for. Drivers, typically. That's when you listen to radio anymore in your car, because when you're not, you have your iPod or whatever you're doing. But on the car, you still tune into the radio sometimes. And so they were catching drivers, and I thought that was important. So we branded the project the 215 Big Ship. And the hashtag was a critical piece of this puzzle. If you're not in the Twitter world, and I'm sure all of you are, as Ken said, most of us are, the hashtag is what allows you to kind of focus and filter that conversation into a very specific place so that you can actually engage in the conversation and see what people are saying rather than sifting through the other 1 million tweets in between the two hashtags that came up during that one-day episode of something. So then the tweets started to come. ODM was the DJ that we tapped into. He does the drive time stuff. He started, have you followed that 215 news? And have you following the hashtag there and getting it started. We also introduced some contests within that radio platform as well to get people actually active involved in it. From there, kind of their followers started to take on. There was a community group that has a Dine 909. They had a chili cook-off that was going to be going on. And their traffic, obviously, through the corridor was going to be an effect of their ability to get to the cook-off. And so they started hashtagging our stuff and pushing them to our content so that we could share what the detours were, what the closure times were, all of that kind of element. And then it got really interesting to us because LA Total Traffic took on the mission for us as well. We never reached out to them. I never talked to them directly one-on-one. They just started to hear what was happening. It started to get interesting to them, and now they realized that there was a customer base out there that they could reach to, which then expands their following potential as well. Everything with the hashtag in it so that we all have that connection. What we want to do though is start to track what were the results and what's happening with that. So April 26th, again, I told you Cinco de Mayo weekend was the weekend that we were going to do this. So April 26th, through ODM, through 99.1, through ourselves, we have about 25,000 accounts that are putting out the 215 Big Shift hashtag, and the same amount, well, roughly same amount of impressions, meaning that basically I'm getting one comment from each of the accounts that are participating in this on some level. A week later, we're still in that 25,000 accounts, but now the impressions are up to about 115,000, which meaning that people are talking about it more than once. It's starting to become something of interest within the community, and it's really starting to take some legs for us. And I thought, okay, this might actually work. We might actually achieve some diversion on this project, which is ultimately our goal. But it really got interesting to us, though, is when the LA Times blog hit what we were doing. So that went from a scenario of 25,000 to now 352,000 accounts that saw it. Again, exponentially out when you talk about that. Almost 500,000 impressions on that one day relative to this one particular LA Times blog. And then it got crazy. The media just started to jump on board for us. And that's exactly what we were hoping for. To be able to convert this social media agenda into a traditional media opportunity, because now we really reach even more people that are directly interested in what's happening, and it becomes very visual. LA Times, KTLA, ABC, people were reaching out to us. I did not make those, I didn't push that media piece. They reached out to us and it was very successful. What it ended up doing for us, when you talk about LA media though, it's very competitive. They cover that whole expansive Southern California area, the entire area of that map and a little bit beyond, but they tend to focus on LA City itself when it's competitive. As you go out from that center point, it gets more and more competitive for that space on television to get any kind of spot that you want. Typically, the only thing that we get when we're out here, that's where our project was, is if it's a bridge falls down or a snowstorm or something of that nature that just cripples the system. That's the only time we're going to get the attention from the LA media, typically. For us, however, it went a little better. Because of that media influence, we were able to get on the air on the Los Angeles media 66 times over the course of that weekend. That got us in the eyes of almost 5 million people. Not all those people are obviously not coming through our corridor, but either they are, some of them are, or some of them know somebody who is, and so then they start to pick up the phone or send a message or text somebody, are you aware of that? And it just grows and grows and grows. The ad value, if I was to buy that time on LA media, was about $250,000. Again, I had a $20,000 budget, and I was able to get almost $250,000 in value in that scenario. That alone, to me, if I was to take that as my measurement, is successful from my side of the house, but the construction side still wants to know, are we getting the diversion? And we think that we did. 11 p.m. Friday, before I think it was the 4th, we closed at 11 p.m. The initial, I don't know if you're familiar with construction projects and their initial closure, especially on long-term closures. You tend to miss about 90% of the population, and so you end up getting a 60 to 90 minute delay in that initial closure point of your activity. Our delay at maximum was 23 minutes in that first hour or two of the closure. 11 p.m. didn't hurt on that, but it still could have been quite terrible. 13 hours later at noon the next day, maximum delays were 9 minutes. I don't know if you understand the significance of that 9-minute delay, but it is just unbelievable that we were able to achieve that. We think that we got a diversion somewhere in the area of 55 to 62% diversion off the freeway system because people knew. And when people know, they have the ability to make choices, and they make them. They know their local areas, they know their routes, they know where they're going, or they plan ahead. Many people came before the closure ever happened to get up to those recreational areas. And we worked with the trucking industry in understanding what was going on too, and helped to keep them out of the way. We weren't completely successful, as you see. The next day at 1 o'clock on Sunday, we were scheduled to open in the morning on Monday. At 1 o'clock, we were able to open the facility in its new configuration, traffic back into that shifted scenario. We really believe strongly that we affected that opportunity with the construction side through our outreach of this project. Because when you have to manage traffic management seriously during those kinds of closures, sometimes you can even be required by California Highway Patrol or other enforcement agencies to actually pick those closures up and clear it through, or find ways to reduce that queue. We didn't have to do that, and so they could focus on the matter at hand, which was getting the construction effort ready for that big shift. And the next day, that is the result of the 215 big shift. All of our traffic now shifted over to the southbound alignment and the northbound side ready to be used for the next stage of that construction activity. We were able to open that project in January to a lot of applause from the community. And I didn't measure tone during this analytics of this process, but if you were to follow the threads through the 215 Big Shift hashtag, you would have seen that the tone was relatively positive. Thank you for letting us know, that kind of a thing. So there's opportunity there. So this is kind of a blend of both the social media side and the conventional media side. But I do think strongly that you have to kind of, when you have limited resources, which I'm sure all of you will start to nod your head if I ask that question, are you limited on your resources? You can be creative and you can use this as a tool as part of your full array of opportunity in sharing information with the public. It is not just one way to do anything. It's everything's a complement to the other thing. And so I think it was a very valuable exercise, and we're going to continue to look at ways to be creative moving toward the future. So thank you for your time.